Welcome to We Need to Talk Now, presented by AT&T. I'm Alicia J, and I'm here with Erica L. Ayala. And it is the first show of 2026, Erica. I cannot believe it. Where has the time gone?
I'm telling you, a new year. We got already some changes in women's basketball. We've got some returns to the court in tennis. And of course, all my eyes are set on the Winter Olympics.
Man, there's so much going on. And I feel like from the last show to this show, it's been every single sport is hit in some way, shape, or form. So we're definitely going to cover as much as we can right here on the first show of the season. And if you have not subscribed, do so. Make that your resolution. Hit that, subscribe button, mash the like button, do all the things because we want to stay connected with you in this new year with all the things we have going on. And you want to stay connected with us too because we have the tea. We have the sports tea over here. Okay.
All right.
Period. So do that now. Do not wait. Do not wait. But, we can't wait for three big things. We're going to start off the show as we do every time with three big things that we need to talk about. And listen, 2026 hasn't really been great to LSU so far. I mean, they've had two straight losses to number 11 Kentucky, number 12 Vanderbilt. A lot of people are saying that they should have had a tougher non-conference, slate to get to this point. Kim Mulkey even said, in a lot of ways that, it's toughness. You either have it or you don't. And we're not tough enough. And that's all the players in the locker room tonight. So she's been saying comments like that. That's just one of many things that she said after the losses that they had. So when you see this, is it time to push the panic button for LSU?
I always am cautious to say that 2 losses as we're getting into conference play, these are things where there is a pedigree, right? Whether you're thinking about Kim Mulkey or now in the last handful of seasons with LSU, where you do expect them to do a little bit better. And I believe, right, Kim Mulkey was also asked about the parity that we're seeing and why things are opening up. And she said, money, 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 money. Okay, that's a direct quote. But, so I think there are a few different elements, and we've talked about that before. As far as conference, non-conference play, we've heard different coaches talk about this, and that sometimes it's difficult to schedule non-conference games for a whole number of reasons. The other teams that you're looking to compete against have to agree. There's all of these kind of, you get to travel to these tournaments and things of that nature. There's a lot to consider. So I think panic is because they've lost 2 games. Maybe not, but the toughness, Kim Mulkey calling out her team on the toughness, and I say calling out, I would imagine these are conversations that she's had in the locker room with them, so not a surprise. But what I think was also interesting is Flau'jae having no points in the game against Vanderbilt. That to me is a little bit more of an area for concern. There are reports that she's been dealing with an agitation to an ankle. So is she 100% healthy? But if you have a player like Flau'jae Johnson that's not contributing offensively, and you have a team that maybe isn't competing, as Kim Mulkey has said, with enough toughness, those to me are maybe, or maybe more of the things that we should be focused on. The losses are going to come, but how you're losing and if and how players are going to step up, I think, is what's important. But also you have to give kudos to Kentucky and especially to Vanderbilt.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Yes, Flau'jae definitely had 0 points in the Vanderbilt game. It was her first scoreless game since February 12th, 2023. So something to look at. Hopefully her ankles are okay, or her ankle, I should say, rather, not ankles. That would be Napheesa, which we will talk about soon. Yes. However, when I look at this, and I see all of the upsets because these were 2 games that we're talking about, but there were upsets across the board when it comes to women's college basketball. And I really think that everyone is just stepping it up. That parity is definitely something that is on the rise and something that we're seeing, whether it be money or just like programs stepping up and knowing that they can do it. It's not really it's not really about conference anymore. It's about who is going to get out there and play ball. You know what I'm saying? Like
100%.
it's across the board. So panic button. No. Do we need to go in there and retool some things? Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mhm.
There is a lot of talent on that team. I've been vocal saying that I thought they were a great team and that they had a lot of potential this season, and I still stand by it. But I think that, you know, when you have your coach saying that it's toughness, and she was saying that it was also what was the she said something specifically inexperience. She said some of it you can attribute to inexperience, but she also didn't want to make an excuse.
Right.
You just have to go in there and do it. Audie Crooks actually had a really great quote, and I'm not going to say it verbatim, but it just spoke to how you want to use these losses to fuel you to get to March, which is where they all want to be. Like, you know, you want to really, obviously you don't want to lose, but you want to use these things to get you better. Get in the film room, see what you need to retool so that you will be ready in March. And that's what they need to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, what Audie Crooks was basically saying is, you know, we don't want to peak right in January. We want to be on track and trending in March and really be relentless. But just to make an argument for those wondering about conference non-conference schedule, you know, in their first 14 games, in 11 of those games, LSU scored over 100 or more points, I should say. They led Division I basketball. And so we were talking about some of those blowouts, right, on a previous episode. And this is the give and take. And, you know, it might look cute or sexy and all of the kind of, you know, graphics that can go along with that on social media. But then, you know, them 11 games and get you wins in conference play. So, you know, I think broadly, it's a conversation worth having. What does conference play or non-conference play, look like? And what are some of the difficulties of that? And in LSU's case, I think there are other things, you know, that they probably need to focus on first before being like, oh, well, it's because we didn't schedule this way. You know, you have to take care of the X's and O's at the end of the day.
And we're really curious, drop a comment. What do you think about the non-conference play conversation? We can definitely have it more thorough in another episode, but we love to hear what you think to add to that conversation. So go ahead and drop that in the comments below on whatever platform you're on. Now, we're talking about women's college basketball and where teams are going and how they're retooling things and that kind of nature. And South Carolina has definitely done some addition with a new player, Alicia Tournebize from France. And, you know, this is, it's got also garnered a lot of conversation as well, because, you know, she is playing pro or has played pro over in Europe. What is the team? I don't know why I cannot find it, Erica. It's right in front of me and I know it.
Oh, for Borges Basket?
Yeah, Borges Basket. So thank you for that. She definitely has played there, but she's going to become a Gamecock. She's actually already over here, has not played her first game, but the Gamecocks could definitely, they need depth. They need depth. And we talked about that from the beginning. And so it'll be really interesting to see how she does when she does start playing. But what do you think about this conversation? Like, should she be playing on this Gamecocks team?
Well, I mean, first I'll just answer with, if Dawn Staley and the South Carolina Gamecocks didn't violate any protocol or rules, then
At all.
I mean, then I guess it's fair game. I think the question comes, if she has pro experience, what does that yield for the NCAA, which, if I'm not mistaken, amateur is one of the A's. I gotta refresh my look at that. But, you know, this is known. NCAA college is considered, or has been considered, right, amateur basketball. And we've seen that in other sports like swimming and gymnastics, when Olympians have to decide whether they want to return to compete in college or try to compete on the pro circuit and start making some money. So in that sense, I do think it's an interesting wrinkle, because again, in other areas, that's not something that we see athletes be able to do. So I mean, I think really that's just more on the NCAA probably to define, and be more clear with what they expect. And is it across the board in all sports? Are there some sports that have different rules and protocols? Does it matter that this was a player that competed overseas and not domestically in the United States? But what does that mean for domestic born players? Could they then go play in Europe and then sign a contract in the NCAA? I think I understand why people are upset. And as far as South Carolina is concerned, if they went through all the protocol, then I guess it's fair game. I do think that it is a greater conversation for me, and I've discussed this before, when it comes to the NWSL or even what we see in the WNBA. There are very different, when it comes to even just being eligible for a professional draft. There are very different rules and stipulations. Those players who are born in the United States are expected to stay in college up through at least their junior year, or roughly the age of 22. But if you're an international player, that's why we see 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, Dominique Malunga being the more recent, that are competing and are able to be drafted and compete in the WNBA. So again, I think that there's the messiness is probably coming from the NCAA side and not from South Carolina.
Right. Should and can are two totally different things, right? Should they? We could sit here and argue that all day, right? But the fact is that they can.
Mhm.
The NCAA has not, I guess, like solidified that, or they haven't really said like you can or cannot based on your pro experience. And there's a way to do it. South Carolina has done it.
Right.
They did nothing wrong. And so Alicia finna be here and she's gonna play.
She's gonna be here. And we look at, you talk about depth, but also size. And as we kind of hear it talked about in basketball, length, right? So length, of course, has to do with height, but also your wingspan. And this is a player at 6'7", a center. I mean, that gives a lot of opportunities in the paint, because you can get a lot of good paint touches. And you still have to see what Tournebize is able to do as far as footwork and things of that nature. But you can almost, to use a hockey term, kind of use that player as almost like a little bit of a bumper player, where you give that ball 6'7", just toss it up high, kind of like Brittany Griner holding the phone from from Natasha Cloud, for those who are tapped into Unrivaled social media. I think that, and then of course you got to figure out how to stop 6'7". I know the young ones are gonna love when Tournebize's height is announced. But anyway, I think that this is a player who has seen limited minutes overseas, but also is a younger player that has been playing with professionals. And we talked a lot, or we heard USA Basketball talk so much about how a player like Juju Watkins can learn just from osmosis, being injured, but being at USA Basketball camp. Well, what can a player who is getting minutes at a young age against professional athletes, what do you think she's able to learn and can bring that back? So I think it's exciting, whether it's the height or a player that has come to a team mid-season. This isn't unprecedented, but it is very rare, Alicia.
It's very rare. And she's going to have, it's going to take a little bit of time for her to get into the system. I know that Coach Staley said that they're going to have her, on kind of like a lower, she'll have like a lower amount of plays that she'll be able to run. Like they want her to make sure that she integrates into it in a like slower way. Not everything is thrown right at her, which obviously is something that I think is very smart. She has a lot of time. We have had the preseason, but we're just getting into conference play. And so it's not like the tournament is next week. So she'll have a little bit of time to make that transition. But I'm really excited for them. They need her. They need, like you said, they need her length. They need her depth. They need her athleticism. She is a player that can dunk and has dunked in game. She was one of the first players to do that, I believe, in France, I believe. And so, it's just, or on her team, rather, she was one of the first players to do that in actual play. So not only, the dunking aspect, but just what they need, with having Chloe Kitts out. It's just, to me, like, it's genius. It's genius for that team. And I can't wait to see what she does. But I think there's going to be a transition for sure.
Yeah. And I think
just throw yourself into that.
Right. And how South Carolina plays it is going to be key, because you have to hit that balance. I mean, I talked about Dominique Malunga, but you want to ease in the transition knowing that you have a little bit of time. And, sometimes the best way is that trial by fire. Just figure out what you can do and then go from there. So I think it's going to be curious. The Gamecocks, will talk about the AP poll, but they're still top 3 ranked squad. And so if this is a hit for them, it could potentially really impact what they're able to do, especially late in the season.
Yeah. And it's not going to detract from the team. That's for sure. So in my opinion, I don't think so. I mean, I'm not saying that you sit her, but like, what's the worst that can happen? She just doesn't play, right? If she doesn't add to it. So she's going to add in some way. That's
100%.
That's how I
And with Tanaya Watson, having a sprain, an ankle sprain, that's something that, as Dawn Staley said in her quotes, you just have to kind of manage that pain. So Watson, they're not a like for like, right? Obviously, they're not a like. One's a front court player, one's a back court player.
Yeah.
And how do you then, if you can, utilize some of her minutes to maybe have less exposure to maybe some of the holes that the Kitts injury or the Watson, she's maybe not 100%. I think that's going to be interesting. But man, listen, ankles, everyone take care of your ankles, y'all.
Man, everyone. The ankles, they play no games. I remember having ankle injuries, but somebody who's definitely dealing with ankle injuries right now is Napheesa Collier. She has to undergo surgery on both ankles, which is crazy. Like, when I think about the recovery on that, the timeline for her return is 4 to 6 months. She'll miss the Unrivaled season, which she's one of the founders of Unrivaled, and obviously on one of the teams as well. So she'll miss that season, and then potentially the start of the WNBA season. She's doing all of her rehab in Miami with Unrivaled. And she said of her recovery on Instagram, "I am heartbroken to share that I will miss this Unrivaled season. I have fought hard over the last few months to be back with my Owls, and was devastated to be told by my team of doctors that surgery was the best path forward." So, I mean, I know I have my thoughts on this, Erica, about her recovery and the timing of this. But I'm just curious, what do you think this means for just the W season? We know she's out for Unrivaled, but, the start of that.
Yeah, I think the best that I can take away from this situation is that, at least similarly to what Juju Watkins said, listen, I'm just not playing. I'm going to focus on recovery. So for Napheesa Collier to do that, you mentioned that she's a co-founder, of course, the other one being Brianna Stewart. I think Stewie was a little more banged up than she let on heading into that inaugural season of Unrivaled. And she did have a little cleanup, just a little minor procedure after her Unrivaled season was over. But I think the best thing I can say for Fee is that she isn't trying to rush back. She knows that Unrivaled is off of the table. So now she can spend that time in rehab and recovery. And I think that's critical. You don't want to rush that process. So I like that. And then off of the court, she's a co-founder. We've seen her already all over social media for Unrivaled as they start their season today, Monday. But also, this means that you have Napheesa Collier, in theory, perhaps potentially able to contribute, and have it maybe perhaps a different energy that she can bring to some of the conversations that are going on around the WNBA. Now, whether or not she'll be healthy for that season, we don't know, but we also don't know yet when the season is going to start. So this is tough for Fee, a player who looked like she was on track to be MVP. We know that A'ja Wilson ended up getting that MVP and making history there. I still think this is a Napheesa Collier who, when she can come back healthy, if she can get back on track, setting her goals, she set that 50, 40, 90 goal and was pretty much there all season, Alicia, before she had her first injury, which kept her away, right? In August, in early August, she missed 3 weeks. And then unfortunately we saw where she rolled. I mean, rolled is putting it lightly. But she and Alyssa Thomas, kind of collided, and in that she disrupted her other ankle. So I think it's good for Fee that she is focused on her recovery, and potentially it's good for players in the WNBPA to have someone like Napheesa Collier, who rang the alarm, as Beyonce might say, when it comes to these CBA negotiations.
Right. And that kind of leads to my point. We see how the CBA negotiations are going. And this is a pretty major, 2 ankle surgeries at the same time is a pretty major thing. And that is something that takes time, as we said, 4 to 6 weeks to come back. This might be the perfect time to do it. We don't want the W season to be delayed at all. We don't. We want to see it start when it's supposed to, but we're going to give a CBA update in a moment here, and the sides aren't coming together. We'll just put it like that. And we'll give you a thorough update, so definitely stay tuned for that. But with that said, this might be the time to get your ankles in order. I don't
ankles in order.
I don't even know why I said it like that, but
but for real, get your ankles in order.
They need a little surgery. You know what I'm saying? So in order to
finances and your ankles in
order. Are your ankles in order? Ask yourself that. I might put that in my bio. But however, to recover from something like that, it takes time, and we don't want to see her not play unrivaled. However, in order to be ready for the season and everything she's worked towards and the season we know she will have, she needs to be healthy. And this might be just the time to do it based on what we're seeing. And I hate to say that, but it's just the truth.
Yeah. You kind of hit on it, and we'll get to it on the other side here, but we have a deadline coming up. Now that can be extended. We've seen extensions before, likely going to be extended. But even if not, at this point, if your doctors are saying this is what you need to do, sis, then that's what you got to do. Because this is a player that is not even at peak yet. There's so much growth for Napheesa Collier. And in some ways, I'm curious how much of the storytelling can she bake into her recovery and being out Unrivaled, because that was a huge storyline in season 1. So, just having all of those resources in-house at one location. Well, they'll be traveling to Philly also this season, but I think it's going to be interesting.
Well, if anyone is going to chronicle it correctly, it will be Unrivaled. Their coverage is unmatched. I absolutely love everything, seeing all the players, all the teams. It's really important to know too that it starts today. So if anybody wants to tap into Unrivaled, definitely do that. But they do a great job of storytelling and showing, the different player personalities, a lot of them that we don't normally get to see all the time either. And so we'll definitely be in tune for that, and just wishing Fee a speedy recovery. That's it. And getting those ankles in order. So, but as we talked about, we're going to be talking CBA, and we're going to do it right when we come back after this break.
The new era of UFC on Paramount Plus comes out swinging. The highlight machine collides with the Liverpool phenom, and the Hall of Famer returns to take on the bantamweight champion. UFC 324, Saturday, January 24th, only on Paramount Plus.
One thing we definitely want to know is if we're going to start the WNBA season and if we're going to start it on time. And that all depends on the CBA, Erica. January 9th is the deadline, which is approaching very fast. And there's an option to extend as well, which is important to know. And we're getting deep into the offseason timeline. Typically, free agency begins at the end of January, and the expansion draft for the two teams still has to happen. So there's a lot that is on the table as far as schedule goes. But can you give us a just report, an update on where the CBA is? Because from what I'm hearing, they're just not seeing eye to eye.
Yeah, and I mean, the updates honestly aren't, there's not much that has changed except that we're just further into the timeline. So Alexa Philippou doing some reporting and saying that, you know, reportedly that the sides remain far apart on several key issues. We know that revenue sharing is one of those, including apparently what is considered revenue. And so when we talk about that, you know, we also want to talk about gross and, you know, gross revenue share, things of that nature. But what we're hearing is that, first of all, the league is saying that the revenue share that the WNBPA, the union, the players are projecting would create a $700 million loss over the course of the entire CBA agreement. So not in 1 year, but over time. Now, the WNBPA proposal includes a 30% gross revenue share and a $10.5 million salary cap. The league has proposed a few different versions of the salary cap, but also, you know, they want to see that salary cap at 5 million, not that 10.5. So already we're seeing the discrepancy there. Again, the league saying that this would lose the league $700 million. But what we're hearing from the Players Association is that, you know, they feel that the league is in a profitable position, and they feel like the projections and the loss, that $700 million, is, quote, absolutely false, is the quote that we've been seeing on that. And some of the discrepancies in the accounting, which we've seen continue to be talked about, quite honestly, for the past several years, Alicia, it happens again with what is considered revenue, including that the WNBA, through the expansion teams, right? They, in the last expansion, they got $250 million each from Cleveland, Detroit, and Philadelphia. That's not even counting Golden State, the Valkyries, who started this past season. That's not counting Portland and Toronto, who are coming in this season. That's just $250 million each. So that's already $750 million total. But according to the league's accounting, that doesn't count towards revenue. The WNBPA, of course, has questions as to why. And so, you know, the expansion fees are transactions that generate zero net revenue. So that is interesting because it is a fee, right? That's paid. I think what you could possibly argue is, well, that might not be direct revenue, but then also, like, where does that money go? Like, what does it go towards? You know, like, does a piece of paper cost $250 million to be like, you are a WNBA team? I don't know. I genuinely do not know.
Right.
So what that breakdown is, I think it's worth having that conversation. Like, where does that money go? What does it go towards? But I think another way you can look at it, and if I were maybe a part of the WNBPA, what I would say is, even if you don't consider that gross revenue or revenue at any kind of revenue, how does that impact valuation? You know, because the valuation, even just of the expansion fees, has gone up every single time. So as Fat Joe says, yesterday's price ain't today's price, because Golden State didn't pay nobody's $250 million. And Portland and Toronto didn't pay nobody's $250 million. but that every time we've seen expansion, the price has gone up. And so if that isn't revenue, then where does that money go? And if you're seeing the valuation even in expansion fees going up, then does that go towards the capital raise and paying those investors back, which is some money that they're going to have to pay back? Does it go to any of the debts that the WNBA has already accrued on the NBA Enterprises account? I mean, they're all valid things. There are different ways to look at this, but what I'm hearing is that the two sides, or specifically the players, are not explicitly clear on how the WNBA and thus the NBA are kind of where they're sorting those numbers. And so I think that's what is causing such the wide gap and discrepancy when it comes to what the revenue share is going to be percentage wise, but then also what that salary is going to be. And is it going to be something that's fixed? Is it going to be kind of a staggered approach, either appreciating or increasing or decreasing over the term of the contract? Are you going to kind of front load it? So there's a lot of different ways to look at this. I don't want to say that one way is quote unquote better or not, but that's what the negotiation is, because there are different ways in a negotiation to try and get value out of these numbers. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, all questions that need clear answers. I think the numbers have always been the thing that nobody agrees on. And obviously when you're doing a negotiation and back and forth, there's going to be some of that. But when you say $700 million in losses over the course of the agreement, you got to show me how.
You got to show me
what that is.
Right. That's like middle school, right?
Right. So I can see exactly why the players are like, well, how can we go off of this if we don't have the clarity around this? These are a lot of numbers that are being thrown around, on both sides, but there needs to be clarity. Right. You can't just throw out a number and just think that is bond.
100%. And again, just to be clear, it's not that these aren't within the realm of possibility in theory. Although some economists and the PA are saying like absolutely false, especially on that 700 million number, putting that perhaps to the side because the players have reacted very strongly to that. Again, there is a world in which, yes, you could be at $700 million. I mean, I never lost that much money, but it's possible. But again, show your work. Where is this going? And then I think also what we have to talk about here, and what the players I think are mentioning, is whether we're looking at growth or we're looking at losses or expenses. Should the players have to have their earnings adjusted for decisions about revenue that are made by other entities or other parts of the WNBA, because they're helping drive what we do know as revenue? Because again, apparently what is considered revenue is also up for discussion. But what we do know is ticket sales, merchandise, social media engagements, which then helps lead to sponsors, direct sponsors, even to players. All of those things, players are driving in the positive route. I haven't seen anyone talk about how players are negatively impacting sponsorships or partnerships, right? We haven't seen any of that be part of the conversation. So I think it stands to reason that it's negligible, if even at all, that that's happening. So then why should the players see a decrease in their potential earnings based on business decisions that are made outside of the WNBPA? I mean, that's just another way to look at it.
Right. And at the end of the day, none of this revenue would be happening if the players weren't out there on the court. Simply put. Simply put. And that's and at the end of the day, that's what is driving everything that is happening in this league. So we need some clarity. Let's throw some clarity in there. These numbers now.
Show me the money. Or
yeah. But we'll definitely show you the updates on the CBA as we go on with this because it's so important. I mean, it's a moment. It will be a moment for past and present and future WNBA players when this is solidified. So we'll definitely be here to bring you all the updates on that. And an update that I'm so happy to bring, even though it has taken a long time to get here, okay? But we love to see this. We love to see this. Laila Edwards, okay, is named to Team USA's 23-player roster for Milano Cortina 2026, set to become the first Black woman to play for Team USA at a Winter Olympics in ice hockey. A huge moment in history. We love to see this. We actually had a conversation. Ashley Nicole Moss had a conversation with Laila, and she had it was an amazing interview. So if you haven't seen it, go to our YouTube channel. The full interview is up on there. But she had some things to say about her experience as a Black woman in hockey. So take a listen to this.
For 2023, I wonder what your experiences in the sport were like, because when we think of football, when we think of basketball, you know, you're used to seeing so many Black and brown faces. And even with baseball, you know, because so many of those athletes come from the Caribbean and Hispanic countries, and you see color. But when it comes to sports like golf and hockey and even tennis, up until, you know, recently, we're starting to see more and more brown and Black girls and men and people in general play the sport. It still is the minority in some of those sports. So before that year, what was your experience like in a sport where you were always the minority?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, once again, just being like open and honest, it was hard at times. And there were plenty of times, unfortunately, where I like wanted to quit because of it. But I don't want to instill fear in anyone. I want them to see that it's worth it, you know, going through those hard times and not seeing anyone that looks like you, getting weird looks when you walk into the rink. You know, there were even times where I was asked, oh, are you in the right place? Or they would tell my parents, you know, the basketball court's that way. Just things like that, which suck, but that's kind of unfortunately the way it is right now. And that's my goal, is to limit that and to make the game more inclusive and just, you know, fixing those little things that can turn people away from hockey. Because not only is it expensive, but once you get into it, it's hard.
Yeah.
Around walking in and being, you know, the only person of color. But I think there was a switch at a point in time for me where I was like, I'm just going to use this as motivation. I'm going to stop letting it bring me down and discourage me, because like I can keep making it far, and which will inspire other people. Because I'm like, the game can't stay like this forever, you know. You know. So that's when I started to say, okay, I'm going to make it a goal of mine to try to grow the game in that way and to inspire, like I say, anyone, but more specifically, you know, girls and boys of color.
Some powerful words from Laila Edwards about her experience as being a Black woman in hockey. I know I can relate. I grew up in Beaverton, Oregon, and I was one of 30 kids of color in my school district. I was often the only woman of color, the only Black woman for sure out there on the court, and was called, you know, the N-word many times out there on the court. There was a lot of things that I could relate to when it comes to that, but definitely when it comes to the sport of hockey, I can't even imagine, you know, we got a little glimpse of what it has been like for her, but I can't even imagine what it has been like for her to come up in this sport, achieve the things that she has, and to make this history, Erica.
You know, I have not had the honor yet of speaking to Laila Edwards. However, I have spoken to a lot of the pioneers that have made USA hockey camps, but have not been officially rostered for the United States in senior tournaments. So maybe they played U18 or, you know, the junior level, and then were in camps for the senior national team, but never made it to the place where Laila Edwards is, where she's making history as the first woman to be in international tournaments, world championships, rivalry series, and now to an Olympic roster. And that's a lot of what we hear. And another thing you have to remember in hockey, especially with some of the players certainly older than Laila. Laila's probably right around that cutoff, but hockey players, they go to boarding schools and they're living with what are called billet families. And so as a Black player, you hear that they're away from home. They're going to these schools where they're specializing effectively in hockey, and they have these big dreams, but the families that they're staying with overwhelmingly are not families of color. They are not Black families. So everything from getting your hair done to dealing with the flat out racism that will happen when you're at the rink or when your family comes to the rink. Everyone assuming, especially because Laila is 6'1", or excuse me, 6 foot. I think she's 6 foot, 6'1". She's tall, basically, especially for hockey players. Women's hockey players don't usually hit 6 foot. So this is a tall player, and it's like, oh, are you here for basketball? You know, so I think it's interesting. I want to say I find it inspiring, actually, how she can be very honest and upfront with what she and her family in particular have experienced, and that she has already taken ownership and wants to be responsible for the sport being better overall, but especially, as she said, for boys and girls of color who have aspirations to continue to play hockey and maybe even play in the Olympics. But she's going to be the first U.S. player to compete in the Olympics. Sarah Nurse was the first Canadian player to compete at the Olympics. We also had Angela James, who is a Hockey Hall of Famer. She did compete in World Championships, not at the Olympic level for Hockey Canada. And Sarah Nurse at the 2022 Olympics, Winter Olympics, my first Winter Olympics, she became Sarah Nurse, that is, whose cousin, Kia Nurse, you may know from WNBA. And she also has a cousin, Darnell Nurse, who plays in the NHL. But Sarah Nurse became the first Black woman to win an Olympic gold medal for Hockey Canada in Beijing 2022. That was the last Olympics. And the way Team USA plays, likely Laila Edwards will be the first Black woman to at least compete for an Olympic gold medal if things go the way we expect them to, and maybe even win Olympic gold and make history yet again. And if you saw some of those rivalry series games, Team USA was looking pretty good against Canada, Alicia. So I'm super excited. I'll be boots on the ground there and cannot wait to see Laila Edwards and her family, who, you know, they are currently raising money and funds to have as many of her family members in Milano Cortina. She hails from Cleveland, Ohio, and they're super excited, of course, to see Laila Edwards continue on her career, but also make history in real time.
Wow, I can't wait to witness that. I'm speaking it into existence right now, but literally so incredibly inspired. I when I hear her tell her story, it's like I can relate, but I also know that there's so many little girls and just people in general that need to hear what she has to say, need to see her achieve the things that she's doing, and also just the fact that she is so, like, even though it's heavy, and she expresses that in the interview, but that she knows that it's part of who she is and her purpose. And it's going to be amazing to see and witness. So sending everything that you need, Laila, in this journey, because we're proud of you and we're excited to see what you're going to do out there on that ice. Okay.
Let's go.
Yes. And we're also excited to see what a certain someone is going to do in tennis. And we're going to talk about that in this week's Guarantee of the Week, presented by AT&T. Now, this week, we are guaranteeing that we are going to watch the Australian Open. Okay. You should too. Because why would you not? Listen, Venus Williams. First of all, she just got married. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Looked amazing. But at the age of 45, she will become the oldest female player to compete in the Australian Open main draw. Will play in both singles and doubles. Okay? You better do that, girl. Last appearance was in 2021. First appearance was in 1998. 1998. Okay?
No.
And she said, I'm excited to be back in Australia. I've had so many incredible memories there, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to return to a place that has meant so much to my career. And then some people have criticized the wild card because everybody want to have something to say. But anyways, she also had something to say back. I think one of my goals is to be joyful and just embrace being uncomfortable, because that's the things champions can do. I definitely don't wake up and come halfway across the world or more than halfway to not be feeling the fire. And other Americans to watch in addition to Venus, because I'm so excited. Anytime I can watch her play. I saw her at the US Open this year for the first time.
I know, I was thinking about that. Yes.
Yeah. So anytime I get to watch her and anytime we get to watch her, it's amazing. But other Americans to watch that are currently 4 women in the top 10 in the world in women's tennis. Coco Gauff, Amanda Anisimova, and Jess Pegula, and our girl Madison Keys, which we've also done an interview with as well. So, just make sure you're locked into this Australian Open, right? It begins January 12th, and I know I'm going to be there, and I know you're going to be watching.
I'm gonna be locked in, especially because there was a series of documentaries for one of the Title IX anniversaries, and one of them is entitled Venus Versus, and it talks about how she was an integral part of pushing the equitable pay for the WTA, specifically at Wimbledon, and for that specific tournament and the earnings pot there. And so I was just recently watching that. It's a fantastic documentary directed by the one and only Ava DuVernay. So, it's fire. So, when Venus talks about the haters and why she is even eligible for the tournament, I think Venus said it great. She knows best. And put some respect on Venus's name. And if you don't know about Venus, go check out Venus Versus, because that's just one of the many times that either she or her sister Serena have put on for women in tennis and for Black women in tennis.
And if you don't know, where have you been, child? Where have you been? Because
there might be some youngins watching. Hey, boo, how you doing? Go watch the doc. Go watch the doc.
Please go watch the doc. Please go watch the doc, because you must. But that's our guarantee. We're going to be front and center watching the Australian Open for sure. And we're going to be front and center watching these AP polls.
Woo!
Okay. For women's college basketball, they're dropping these polls, and there's been a lot of movement. Oklahoma is up 3 spots to number 5. Kentucky is up 5 spots to number 6. Okay, Kentucky, you've been balling out there.
I know, that's right.
Vanderbilt up 5 spots to number 7. Michigan and Louisville each rose 3 spots. Maryland only dropped 1 spot to number 8. LSU, as we talked about earlier, dropped 7 spots to number 12. And TCU dropped 5 spots to number 13. A lot of movement, a lot of talk about who should be where and why some people are higher and some people should be lower. And we want to hear what you have to say too. So make sure you drop that in the comments, because we got to have that conversation. But Erica, when you look at this, how are you feeling? How are you feeling about this new list?
All right. I'm feeling a few things. First of all, at the top of the list, looking pretty good. 1 through 4. Okay. And also, I see UCLA at 4 up and now. Okay, come on now. I know we talked about that in one of our last episodes. And you know what? I'm at headquarters here in Oklahoma. So anytime I see Oklahoma or OSU on the list, I'm like, okay, I'm learning about this area in the country, and I love to see it. I remember not too long ago, people being like, oh, well, as far as top 10 or top 25 teams go, do we really want to talk about Oklahoma? Yes, you do. I'm knocking on my camera right now. Yes, bang, 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 bang. Yes, that's absolutely right. I love that. Now, this is the conversation that I think people are having, Alicia, right? All this movement is mostly teams that were at the top or higher, right, in the rankings, sliding down multiple spots, and not so much movement maybe for like a Maryland who recently lost. And I think there's a few different ways that you can look at this. I think you can say, it seems to me, perhaps there's a trend in that for the voting journalists, a ranked team, and perhaps a ranked team with a certain pedigree, the LSUs, the South Carolinas, we've seen Notre Dame in the last year and now going into this season dip before, or rise for that matter. I think losing as a ranked opponent or as a ranked team to a team that's ranked lower than you, or maybe even unranked, if there's what's considered an upset, that's going to knock you down a few pegs. Now, is that necessarily quote unquote fair or right? We've been talking about parity. We've been talking about non-conference schedule. That is certainly up for debate. But that's just where we're at right now. I'm not so upset about Maryland. I think the slide and the skid for some of these other teams is a little tough. I will also say that perhaps the voting panel is also expecting those teams to get some wins and that they'll rise back up at a certain point in time. But that's the thing about these polls and different power rankings and stuff like that. There's always so much interpretation, and there's a wide range of, again, panelists. And how much are we looking at how things have been even really 5 or more years ago versus what is now and today. 5 years ago, even as early, and that's probably more conservative. It's probably even longer or further back, but we weren't expecting upsets the way we've been seeing them, even just early in January in this year. Is there something where we need to, the collective we in women's basketball, we need to really figure out a formula that is more consistent with the level of play that we're seeing across the board, and not just in the top 5, not just in the top 10, 15, 25, but again, throughout all of women's basketball?
I have no notes because I really have nothing else to say after that. You said it. You put it all up in a bow, Erica, because first of all, it is subjective. Like
100%.
There's that. And kind of like, how do people get to vote? I don't know. There's so many things when it comes to voting that are just kind of all over the place. I'm not saying that I don't take stake in this AP poll. Obviously, It's a huge thing. People have conversations about it every week. And it does, show you who is at the top and all that. But like when you get to the middle, it's really hard to say who should be above who and everything. Just, we've seen so many upsets. People were talking about Maryland only dropping 1 spot, but they also came back and they bounced back like with a great team after that. So it's one of those things where you can't really gauge how people are voting and, how they will vote. But I think by and large, especially at the top, they got it right. That I would say that. And so, maybe there does need to be a deeper dive into how this happens and how it's formed. But, I don't see a lot for me personally. Like the Maryland one didn't alarm me as much as other people would. But also that's I'm being subjective as well. So it's just an amazing point of conversation that we have every week when it drops. And I'm not, I reserve the right to be angry about it later.
I respect that.
But, at the end of the day, and especially at this point in the season, it's really hard to gauge like why people are voting, how they're voting, and et cetera, so.
Yeah. And, maybe if we want that mechanism to be a little bit more accurate, maybe there's some kind of weighted system, and you look at opponents that teams are playing in the non-conference schedule, and then there's like a rubric, right? And so that determines where you can even rank depending on who your opponent is, because that's another thing. Where is your strength of schedule at the time that the vote is cast? Because that could make a difference. That could make a difference, and are you winning with a low strength of schedule, but maybe that keeps you at the top, and then you start hitting the more arduous parts of your calendar, and now you're dropping you out the door trying to knock back, I'm just saying. So I don't know, it's very interesting, but also, what are these used for? I think it's for this, it's for conversation, right? And so I don't want people, don't be like, trying to go out here and make enemies of these voters. Like you said, it's subjective, it's a part of the conversation, and it creates a nice back and forth. But what I think we can guarantee, I'm adding a new guarantee. Sorry, AT&T. Come on. What we can guarantee is that the last word, as far as whose stock is up and down, comes on the court. Okay, that's why you got to lock into these games, because you never know what you fit to see. We're seeing players, individual players, and players that have flown under the radar that are willing their team, are leading their team to significant wins and really strong performances out here. And that, at the end of the day, is what matters. As Audie Crooks said, we're not trying to impress nobody. I mean, I'm paraphrasing. We're not trying to impress nobody in January. Come see about me in March.
Okay. And that's on that. That's on that. Well, we'll definitely. Yeah. Well, one thing I know we're definitely going to do is see about March and in the road to March and everything in every single one of these episodes. Because we got a lot to talk about when it comes to women's college basketball and women's sports. So make sure that you're locked in on every level. You see all the information below. Subscribe, mash the like button, do all the things. And right before we end, I just have to give a shout out. It's always amazing to see people in person. Like, I love meeting all of you out here in the wild, I guess. I was out running errands, and I'm not going to tell all their business, but I met a beautiful couple who watch us every single week. And I just wanted to give them a shout out because we appreciate you. We appreciate every single one of you that watch us every single week right here on We Need to Talk Now, presented by AT&T.